Welcome to KidLit Catalyst. Today's guests are Chris Barton and Jennifer Ziegler.
Kids often ask, is it hard to write a book? I think of writing the way I think of people who enjoy doing puzzles think of those. Nobody who enjoys doing puzzles does them because they're easy. We do them because they are fun challenges. And I think the same way about writing. I don't think it would be nearly as satisfying if it were easy to do. I enjoy the puzzle solving aspect of writing.
Anytime you keep at it, you get better. So yeah, writing's not easy. When you love it, it's worth it. I think when we push past those challenges and we're triumphant when we get, this paragraph, or whatever, when we figure out, like you said, part of the puzzle, that's the most tremendous feeling. I love that feeling.
Welcome to KidLit Catalyst. We're so excited to get to talk with you and be with you today. In case you haven't had the privilege of meeting Chris Barton and Jennifer Ziegler, Chris Barton is the author of picture books including bestseller Shark vs. Train, Cybert Honor-winning The Ziegler Brothers, and Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's super soaking stream of inventions, which has been included on 21 state reading lists. That's amazing. His new books in 2021 and 2022 include How to Make a Book About My Dog, Moving Forward from Space Age Rides to Civil Rights Sit-ins with Airman Alton Yates, and Glitter Everywhere, Where It Came From, Where It's Found, and Where It's Going. Chris and his wife, YA middle grade novelist Jennifer Ziegler, live in Austin, Texas. Lucky for us, Jennifer is here for us too. And I've had to put on my glasses because I messed up the intro like several times. So if you see before, after just happened on the video, this is for your protection. Jennifer is the author of several novels for young and young at heart readers, including Worser, Revenge of the Flower Girls, and Hell Not to Be Popular. She also serves as a faculty co-chair of Vermont College of Fine Arts MFA program in writing for children and young adults. And if you've been watching, you know a lot of people who have succeeded actually were part of that program, and she instructs there. A native Texan of Mexican-American heritage, Jennifer lives in Austin with her husband and favorite author, Chris, and their boss, ready for it, drum roll, a terrier mix named Ernie. When not teaching or creating books, Jennifer loves to visit schools, festivals, and conferences to lead workshops and presentations, urging writers and readers to recognize their own powers and use them for good. We're so glad you're willing to share those talents with here today on KidLit Catalyst. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We made it.
So happy to be here.
We made it through the intros. Oh, I'm so glad to have you guys here. I'm going to kick us off with a question that I have had for you for a long time now, and I've never had the opportunity to ask. So I am super curious about one of the things we talk about a lot on this show is creative process and creativity. And I'm really curious about how you guys have realized that your creative processes are similar, and maybe how they're different, how you approach your work from different angles, from different ways, and maybe what you've learned from each other about creativity and the creative process.
I think one way that our creative processes are similar is that we both tend to plan a lot before we start to write. Especially for me with my nonfiction, I tend to do as much research as I can before I ever start writing, just so I don't go down the wrong, I don't assume that I know what the story is and close myself off to other information that I might get in. And I think that kind of planning is similar to what Jenny does with her novel writing.
Yeah, I mean, I think structure comes more easily to Chris. Chris has a spreadsheet brain, and he has never made a spreadsheet he doesn't like. And I will start spreadsheets and then forget about them. And I don't have that sort of file cabinet kind of, I have what you call maybe a galaxy brain, where I just make all these connections and everything is just kind of a mess, but kind of interesting. It's just not organized. So I have to outline. And that's what Chris means when he talks about the pre-writing I do. I also research, but I have to organize my thoughts and organize and sort of plan out the book and get that sort of 747 view of the whole thing before I start, or I will get lost in my own story and it will just meander and I'll hang out with characters and have a great time, but the story is not being propelled forward. Whereas with Chris, I think you have this inherent sense of structure when you write already.
For fiction picture books, I think that's true. For my nonfiction picture books, and they are primarily historical, and so I almost always use a timeline to organize my research, which I think is somewhat similar to an outline for writing fiction. And what I'm trying to write at the moment is a middle grade novel for which I'm doing a lot of outlining because, from what I've heard, it's the way it should be done. So we are not, certainly for nonfiction or for fiction longer than a picture book, neither one of us is a by the seat of our pants type writer.
No. And he's an early riser and I need 2 cups of coffee and a shower and a long walk. And I am not an early riser. So there is a lot of differences just in when we write and under what conditions as well. But it's really interesting because I get tripped up on logistics and structure. So he's the perfect beta reader for me. And my favorite part of writing is the relationships and the warm fuzzies and the feelings and the characters. And so I like to think that I can offer some help. I like to think that anyway, that I can offer some help in that regard to Chris.
Well, I think everybody benefits from having someone read your story who's not intimately familiar with what's been playing in your head all along, because Jimmy will pick up on things that I didn't notice, or things that I thought were perfectly clear, but if you're not living inside my head, they don't add up. So that's where living with your beta reader comes in really handy, because you've got like 24/7 access to them.
Yeah.
That's so cool about the complementary styles, right? That you really, sounds like you complement each other and play to each other's weaknesses, maybe a little bit, filling in those gaps. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm lucky to
vows.
What?
We should have added it to our vows.
I don't know though, because I remember, I think when we wrote our, what we wanted on our wedding invitation and we wrote our vows, we questioned then, is this the right thing? Not really, but yeah, that was like maybe, one of the most stressful things right at wedding time. But
can we do amendments like as we go on?
Yeah, no, my husband was like editor of his college newspaper, but we both have music degrees and he's a musician. So I get to give comments on his music. He's my first reader for my stories, but yeah. So I loved what you said, Jennifer, at the end when you're talking about, I always call mine my clothes dryer mind. But, it's like, okay, yeah, I can relate to that side. I think that's one of the reasons why Laurie is so impressive to me, because she's great at managing details.
I have the spreadsheet mind for sure. And I think the longer that I'm in this career and learning more about the creative process, my challenge has been learning to switch between the two, right? Like there's really value in both, and learning when, right now I need to be in that galaxy mind and making those connections to things that have nothing to do with each other, and the daydreamy space, right? Like I need that right now. How do I access that? And then getting back into where I'm more comfortable, which is the spreadsheet mind and the planning and the details. So yeah, I think it really, for me, it's really been a journey of figuring out how to tap into the other side and know when I need each one. Yeah.
And so, Celeste, you really are a master of both of those. You know, it's like this is someone with an engineering degree and and then does amazingly creative
background. I didn't finish. Yeah, but yeah, science girl for sure, and creative. And I actually kind of feel like I feel a switch because I really am 50-50, I feel. And but it is a different modality. I literally am in a different way of thinking. So, and I feel that because it's so integral to my flow in all of my work that I'm like one or the other, not a blend of them. And it's really good to have both acknowledged. And how many conferences have you been at when you've heard a keynote or someone who's a best-selling author or just insist outlines are the only way, and then someone else get up and say there is no way they would ever use an outline, that it stifles them, and that they use like bubble charting. And so it's really good to see such accomplished writers share that's just different from us, for each of us, and we can lean on each other's methods, and to hear that both matter in this.
I do
Yeah,
kind of
I think. Go ahead, Chris.
Toggle back and forth. You know, for this middle grade I'm working on, I've got an outline, but I will do it. And so I know what I think is going to happen in this next chapter, which is largely what happens. But then when I'm doing the actual writing, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. But then I'll go back and I'll revise my outline to reflect what did happen, so I can keep that in mind for future chapters. So it's not, you know, an outline is it's a guide, but it's not a list of rules that only these things can happen in this next chapter.
It's a map from which you can detour. And sometimes your characters will say, no, you're going to go left instead of right. And, and as your characters, as you get to know them better. But I do think, Deb, you mentioned comfort, and we all have our comfort zones. And some of us are just more, actually, I think it was you, Laurie, one of you said that where you feel most comfortable is in the spreadsheet, but you go into the other zone. And for me, I feel more comfortable in the warm, fuzzy, gooey part, but I make myself go into the other. And for any project, you need both. And it's just so where we start and where our comfort is, it depends on the person. But it's right brain, left brain, it's art of writing, craft of writing. You need both. And you just need to learn, you just need to have that self-knowledge, and then just, prescribe what you need accordingly.
Yeah. When you were young, did you both always know you were creative? Did you know that you wanted a career in creative arts? Because I think growing up with that logical left brain tendency, I always believed I wasn't creative. I was not going to be in the arts or writing, even though those things always made me happy. I felt like that wasn't my correct path, because all the aptitude tests, all the everything, put me in the logical camp, and that's what I should do. So I think when I was growing up, I felt like there wasn't enough acknowledgement of that side of the brain being valuable in the arts and in creativity. So I wonder if both of you always knew that this was a path you wanted to pursue.
I mean, I was good at nothing else, honestly. Like there was no question. Like I had to do something creative because I was going to ruin some really important projects otherwise. I was very tilted toward the artistic realms. I do love science, don't get me wrong. I don't run away from it. I love science. I'm a rock collector. He can speak to that. I love watching the stars and reading science books. I love his books. The way I think, I knew I had to go into something creative, although I was a teacher as well. I was pushed towards journalism and things where I would have a more guaranteed paycheck. although I'm not sure they would do that these days. You were as well, right? Or
Well, I mean, when I was in first grade, I remember wanting to be either a paramedic or a soccer player or president of the United States. Any one of those would have been fine. In second grade, I wrote, or all, yeah, there, you can balance those. In second grade, I wrote what I think of as my first book. It was called The Ozzie Brothers Meet the Monsters. It was 2 pages long. I wrote and illustrated the whole thing. And after first grade, I don't remember ever wanting to do anything other than be a writer of some sort. It took me a long time to figure out what type of writer that was. I don't remember anyone ever trying to persuade me or dissuade me, either from writing or for doing anything else. So for whatever reason, the people around me were pretty much hands off. So I never felt discouraged, but it took me a while to figure out that this was a type of writing I wanted to do, writing for kids.
Yeah, that's just really interesting. I think how we find our path. When I talk to kids, when I do school visits, I hear a lot of kids will, come up to you afterwards and say, I'm not a writer, it's too hard. And I'm like, writing is this convoluted, complicated process with a lot of different steps, and different ones are hard for all of us, right? We all hit one point in that process where it's like, ooh, this is that part I don't like, like, and we just have to learn tricks and tools and coping mechanisms to get past that part that we struggle with. It's not our comfort zone, and get to the parts we do like, right? I think there's challenges in there for every single one of us, even those of us who do this for a living, and there's pieces we love, even those who say they're not writers and struggle with it. I think there's probably parts of the process that light them up, and so I always try to point them out that even professional writers have a piece of the process that they struggle with, and that's okay, right? It's okay.
And
we all do.
You just touched on, like, that's definitely one of my biggest passions, is getting kids writing, and has been for over 30 years.
And you're so good at it.
Yeah.
Writing.
I love, yeah.
At my school visits, kids often ask, is it hard to write a book? And I almost always reply with some variation on the fact that I think of writing the way I think of people who enjoy doing puzzles think of those. Nobody who enjoys doing puzzles does them because they're easy. We do them because they are fun challenges. And I think the same way about writing. It is a challenge, but it's also fun. It's fun, but it's also challenging. I don't think it would be nearly as satisfying if it were easy to do. I enjoy the puzzle solving aspect of writing.
And I do the same thing on my school visits. I compare us to professional athletes and professional musicians, in the sense that, very few, if any, youngsters are going to pick up a violin and immediately know how to play Paganini. You work at it and you get better and you get better and you get better. And same with those who play sports, you just get better at it. I'll say, do you remember when you weren't sure how to dribble? And now you don't even have to think about it anymore. You just, anytime you keep at it, you get better. So yeah, writing's not easy, but it's always worth it. And like people who are drawn to sports or music, when you love it, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
If it was easy, everyone would do it. It would,
Right. Yeah.
Any sort of expression is any sort of calling is worth it. And being hard doesn't necessarily mean that it's, that somehow that it's lessened, the experience is lessened. And in fact, I think when we push past those challenges, and we're triumphant when we get, this paragraph, or whatever, when we figure out, like you said, part of the puzzle, that's the most tremendous feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I love that feeling.
Yeah, and you both just touched on what already has been shown in some studies, where it's like joy, or, finding your happiness really is on this, what do you call that? the graph thing.
Continuum.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's the combination of passion and challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can land, up in there, you're much better off, and will be happier with all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to also acknowledge that it never feels like something you master. You can always get better. And I can relate to students at the MFA program where I work, but also in elementary school, who are filled with doubt. Because honestly, with every project, it doesn't matter how many books I publish, with every project, I get to a point where I'm like, oh, I've lost it. I used to know how to write a book, but obviously,
so true.
It just went away. I tried on those skinny jeans, and when I took them off, I must have took my talent with it, and it's rolling around the wall, and I'll never get it back.
Yeah. Oh, I know. That's why, I've thought about that, and how, I need to have, like, when I'm at that moment where, wow, this is really flowing. I am so good at this. This is looking great. I need to write down exactly how that feels so that I know that it'll come back, instead of those moments where it's totally over, like you said. How do you keep that in your head, at that time? Oh yeah, that's right. I've been here before.
That's why we need this community, right? Like, we need somebody to remind us, nope, you're just there. You've been here before, you'll come back around. Yeah.
Or that idea that, a lot of people don't even realize that, what you see in your head and what you put down on the paper, on the page if you're painting, whatever it is not the same. And so it's almost like, I think that's where part of the imposter syndrome comes from too. Like, oh, well, somehow this turned out okay. And, when they find out that I really don't have it in me, the gig is up.
Yep. I'm going to be found out. Yeah.
But no, it never comes out that way. And it will never be that way because it kind of takes on a life of its own.
That first draft is the part of the process that is the hardest for me because of that. Like, I just know that what I get out in that first draft is going to be so much less than when it was in my head. Like, I don't want to see it tarnished, like it was really good when it was up here and now look at it. It's like, it's so disappointing.
Oh, I know.
I really have to just try to rush through that phase as quickly as possible so I can get to the polishing, because maybe I can get it, but make it better. But that first step for me is just, it's always the worst.
That's so funny, Laurie, because I'm the opposite.
Right?
I'm one of those few writers who enjoys drafting the best. And I think it took me a while to figure out why. It's not that I'm precious about my words and I don't want to change anything. And that's why I don't enjoy revision as much. And I do enjoy revision, don't get me wrong. It's so cool to see your story just sort of come into focus. But when I draft, I like to forget that I'm creating the world. I like to just sort of particle beam myself into the world and set down the story that I see. And when I revise and edit, I can't do that. I'm very much aware that I am, working a puzzle, and that, I can't disappear into the work the same way. So yeah, I guess it just takes all kinds.
That's so awesome. I don't think you're alone in that. I've heard so many authors say that that's their favorite part, that they love the drafting. That's where they get to play, and and I wish I could have that. I never have. How about you, Chris? Do you have a favorite part and a least favorite part?
Well, from now on, I'm just going to start with the second draft.
Good idea.
Writing that down.
I do love the research process. For me, the hardest thing about researching is stopping my research, because I'm inclined to just keep going and going. And especially during the past year and a half, when haven't been able to physically go. I've got a couple of books where I've gone. I've got a book coming out in January where moving forward, where I ended up with a little over 100 sources in my bibliography. And then those are just the sources that I use. I thought, well, that's a whole lot of sources. Then I finished the bibliography for my glitter book, and it was more than 150 sources in the bibliography. I thought, well, this is a problem now. But I do love I love the research process. One of the things I really love that I hadn't thought about, of course, before I became published, was kind of the way the stories change and kind of take on a life of their own when they are published, and when you kind of have to sell them to an in-person audience or a Zoom audience. I'm fascinated by the like changes I might make to the text, or lines that appear once in the text I might find myself repeating when I read it aloud. And I wonder, would I have written it differently had I performed it like 100 times before it appeared in a book? So that's just a part of the process that's fascinating to me. It kind of shows that a story is never really finished, or it takes different shapes depending on who you're presenting it to and what the objective of that is.
Yeah,
I agree.
so true.
I've decided it's never really finished. So what's your process for when you go, okay, this is done? I'm sure it's different for each book, but what is your process for you when you feel like, yep, this one's done, knowing it's never done?
The editor tells me that.
The editor tells me they've already sent it to the printer. So
Gotta stop now, no more.
There are different, as we all know, there are different phases of done along the way. When I think a manuscript is ready for someone to consider turning into a book, it's kind of when I find myself, if I've let it sit for a while and it still all seems to work, or when I'm actively revising it and, I'm just fiddling. I'm just like, put a comma in, take a comma out. Move a couple of things around, move them back where they were. It's like when I stop finding things that change, I'm just making changes for change's sake. That's a sign that, okay, for this phase of things, it's finished. But if I know if I come back and look at it a month, 2 months, even a week later, my subconscious along the way might have been thinking about things that ways that I can improve it.
I should have left that comma in.
This is why it makes you stop, because it's time to actually print this book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Love that.
A question I got asked yesterday when I was doing school visits, which I thought was such a great question coming from the second graders I was talking to, is what do you do when you get stuck?
I hope you gave a good answer, because I could use one, Laurie. What did you tell them? Don't leave us.
It was stuck.
Well, my answer was I pet my dog, who's right here next to me. I go for a walk. And if that doesn't help, then I am a huge fan of lists. I will just start making lists. What am I trying to say? And, make a list. What is this book about? Make a list. Even just a word bank, a list of words, like, okay, so the whole point of this book is that I want it to be inspiring. What are other words for inspiring? Just brainstorming. For me, it's all about kind of just lists and unlocking my spreadsheet brain, right? Like, give it something to do so that I can get a little bit more creative. So that's how I approach it.
That's really cool. That's that thing where you're getting the answer from yourself, but you have to almost trick yourself to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I have to give my spreadsheet brain something to do so that my right brain can make those connections and do the galaxy or the clothes dryer thing. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. That's why I did the fiction magic cards, was that exact reason. Like, to get my brain in a different place.
Yeah.
And movement really helps. Laurie, you mentioned walks, and I think that's huge. But even just like going and like, okay, I'm stuck, I'm gonna go and do the dishes, and I can be in the middle of a chore and suddenly, I have the answer. And so I abandon the chore. That's why he can attest. Like, there's a lot of half-done laundry piles and stuff, places, because like, I know what I'm going to do now. And I run back. The worst is when I'm on a walk and I run back with the dog, because answer, and the dog is like, what? And the best though is walking with Chris, because I can also talk, I can walk it out and talk it out. And sometimes he doesn't even have to say anything, but other times he can guide me with questions or have you thought about this? And that's really helpful. But there's also a difference between stuck and stuck, because there is stuck in the sense that you don't know what to write. And there is stuck of, you know what you need to write, but it's not coming out. It's, you know, and the reason the first doesn't happen as often for me because I do outline. So, and the second is what usually I'm trying to work out. It's like, I kind of know what I'm supposed to do here, but it's not, everything I try isn't working. And the other nice thing about outlines is it can help with that too, because I'll have, you know, my chapters sort of written out in a very skeletal way. And if I reach chapter 5 and I just, you know, I'm beating my head against my desk because I can't get it to work. One day, like years ago, I realized, oh, I can skip it because I can write chapter 6. I know how to start that. And so I go and I write the rest. And then as long as I go back eventually and write chapter 5, no one will know the difference. But when the first time I did it, I thought I was going to get arrested by the literary police or whatever. And people were going to say, oh, you're doing it wrong. I thought people would be able to tell. But that's another way that outlines can help.
That's so true. The first time I heard an author say that she wrote by just kind of thinking about all the different scenes that she would need and which one was calling her today, like, and that she was writing scenes from all over the book and then putting it together. I was just, mind blown, right? Like, what? You can write like that? Like,
spreadsheet
you don't have to write it, you know, page 1 and I was like, wow.
But that's how movies are made. Movies are shot all out of sequence and then edited together.
Yeah. So why not? No, it was so funny when I heard her say that. It was just like, oh, it was like this huge revelation. Like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. There are no literary police.
Well, I will second or third or fourth the value of movement and going for walks. I get lots of storytelling. I get lots of story ideas and lots of solutions to storytelling problems when I'm out walking or running. If I leave my earbuds behind, if I have my earbuds in, I'll be thinking about whatever it is I'm listening to, whether it's a podcast or music or a conversation with somebody. But if I leave those behind, my mind is more likely to wander. I'm going to have those ideas or those solutions. A couple of other things that work for me, and often when kids ask this question, they ask, you know, what do you do about writer's block? So like they've got this. That's a very real thing to them that they, I guess, fear, have heard. That's a thing that you get when you're a writer, better not become a writer. But I say, I don't think I've ever experienced that. And there are a couple of things that I do. One is I have a notepad where, or one way or another, I always try to capture the ideas that I've got, even if I don't know what to do with them, even if it's just a funny phrase that maybe that's a title of something, I'll try to write that down. So I'll still have that. So I can always go back and look at this long list of random ideas that occurred to me, you know, on my walks or on my runs. But the other thing is I almost always have more than one project I'm working on at a time. So if I'm having trouble moving forward with one project, and Jenny's shaking her head, we should have talked about this at the beginning when you talked about how we're different.
I am so monogamous with my projects, but
I almost always have more than one project I'm working on at a time. So I can switch and work on this other project while my subconscious figures out what to do about the first one, and then I can go back when I you know, kind of know what to do, or when I think, okay, probably my brain just figured out something to do with this now. So yeah, multiple projects, not an excessive number of multiple projects, but even just 2 projects, if you can switch back and forth, that to me, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I'm the same, Chris. Yeah. I like having multiple. And Chris, I know you write in a lot of different genres. Do you find that switching back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, or you know, like picture book to a longer form, do you find those helpful? Because I do. Like, I like having a fiction project and a nonfiction at the same time. I like having a a long form nonfiction and a shorter nonfiction at the same time. It helps me switch when I get stuck.
I could see myself, right? I often do like work on have multiple fiction picture books going at a time, but multiple nonfiction books is I really try to avoid that. And I could not imagine working on multiple like middle grade novels at a time.
Oh,
like
yeah.
It's all I can do to try to make this one.
Yeah.
It's all I can do to exist in this world and in the world that I'm writing. I can't imagine having, on top of that, yet another fictional world. So I admire people who can do that. Which is, I mean, so much so that when I get character voices in my head, I have to do like an exorcism of sorts, like afterwards, because everything I write afterwards is going to sound like that character. And so if you look back on my writing, you'll notice that what I tend to do is switch point of view. So Alpha Dog, my very first trade YA, was first person past tense. My next one was first person present tense. My next one was alternating third person points of view. And then I had my series which was alternating first person point of view. But because it was a series, it was fine to sort of keep them in my head for 4 books. And then I had to immediately after that go back to third person, just so that the rhythms are different, the pronouns are different. It just helps me to find that different tone and that different voice.
Do you do that on purpose intentionally, or does it just come out that way? Like,
it's kind of both. I tried after the triplet series to work on something else that my agent was kind of really wanting me to do. And I really tried, and it just came out sounding like the triplets. But I had this other book called Worser, which comes out next March. And I had been trying to write that before I started the triplet series. And because it was already in third person, I could do that. It just started coming out of me and started flowing, and it was so much easier. So maybe this will get to a point where it's not as much of a problem as I just get better and more experienced, but that's just a trick that works for me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I've never heard anyone say that before. I think that's a really useful tip. That makes a lot of sense.
It really does.
Yeah. I know sometimes I'll play with, especially with picture book manuscripts, of course, much easier because they're shorter, just changing those points of view. And often it's going from third to first and sometimes it just brings more life to it or a different perspective, depending on the type of manuscript it is, which way you're changing. And that's been a fun discovery too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. I have the first time I switched things up when I went from Alpha Dog, my very first trade YA, to my second one, I tried the second one in first person past tense, like the first, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't working. Switched to present tense, just that simple switch. And all of a sudden it just like magic. And I wish I could tell you from this sort of academic, distant standpoints. Well, the reason why it worked for this one is because, the reason why that was perfect was because, I will save that for other people who can better deconstruct my own work. But whatever works, works. And sometimes I just don't even want to question it. Like, just go with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well,
our boss just showed up.
Working.
Yep. There's the boss.
Well, you did say Alpha Dog, so he comes when called.
I'm not sure he knows he's a dog, to be honest.
Oh, do any of them though? And we're all dog people here.
Mm-hmm. We are. So do you ever miss your characters when you finish, or miss the research of that book, or wake up thinking I'm missing someone that I'm supposed to call today? Does that ever happen when you finish?
You?
Yeah, I mean, the subject of the book I've got coming out in January is somebody I've been emailing with this week. So his name is Alton Yates, and I love the fact that he's still in my life. You know, still he and his wife are in our life. So, but typically the people that I write about are no longer with us. No, I do find myself thinking about them. It's like in the case of Barbara Jordan, I find myself, as many people have, wishing that Barbara Jordan were still with us in the 21st century. And so I kind of think about her in that respect.
Yeah. And I've definitely mourned characters and missed them. And to the point where my triplets, where I did 4 books with them. And when you do a series, you get to know them better and better and better with each book. Yeah, I'm going through that now with Worser, with the main character whose nickname is Worser in the book that comes out next spring. I'm missing hanging out with him, and I will forever worry about that kid. And I can see now how sometimes people come up with sequels that maybe don't need to happen just because they want to spend more time with their character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, often that pressure comes from the publisher, I think, if the book does well. But I can see how also some people think, well, how about we just continue the story? But then sometimes you end up with a book that doesn't need to be.
Wow.
I love that. Does a book need to be?
I love that. What a sign that shows that you truly are in that character and in their life.
No wonder they're so good. Huh? Yeah, it came to life.
Wow. This is
anything
full of life.
Right? So good and so rich. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you would just love to share, or is part of the things that you like to advise people or share about your process?
I think the process itself is something that you better enjoy, because you may well be in it for a long, long time. The average amount of time it takes to make one of my picture books is 4.5 to 5 years. It's happened in as little as 2 years and 3 months. It's taken as long as 14 years. But even if it's the fast into that average, even if it's just 4.5 years, that's a long time. And especially if you're a kid asking an author, how long does it take to make a book, or how many books can you make in a day, which I get asked. 4.5 years is forever. And I tell them it's why it's really important to find something you enjoy about the process. You can't be focused only on the end result. You have to find something that satisfies you, that gives you joy, because you may be doing that part of it for a long, long time. And I find many aspects of the researching, the writing, the revising, the exchanging manuscripts with Jenny and with other authors. I find that really satisfying, and it makes the many, many, many years go by a little bit more quickly.
Yeah. And I would say, know yourself, know what kind of a writer you are, know what your strengths are, know what you need to work on. And the more you understand yourself, the more you can try and create a writing environment, a writing routine that works for you. You can challenge yourself with different projects. You can find your voice, which I know is one of those terms that people toss around that a lot of writers are like, but what is voice? And it's just like, you'll find it. It kind of has to do with comfort zone a little bit, like we were talking about. But and just remember, because I think sometimes the pressures to publish can get in the way, and no writing is wasted. Even if you delete a whole section, even if you abandon a manuscript, you have learned, you've gotten better. So don't be down on yourself if you cut several pages of the book, because all that means is that you've found how to focus the story, and that writing helped you to better understand your character, even if you didn't need it for the final product. And a story that you abandon, who knows, maybe you can go back to it later. Maybe you can cannibalize bits of it for other stories. But regardless, even if it just, you never even look at it again, you have gotten better. It's, professional. I talk about professional sports players. They don't just play professional games. That's not the only time they play their game. They also play and practice and play for fun. And we have to do that as writers too.
And just to clarify, when Jenny says no writing is wasted, that's N-O, writing is wasted, and not K-N-O-W, writing is wasted. Very important distinction.
Good clarification there.
Yeah, no kidding. And I love that because it really is focusing on honoring your process too. It's like you don't have to do it like other people tell you to, like we already mentioned, and just say, don't beat yourself up.
Yeah, and not everyone has the same output every day. Some people, if you just write a page a day, well, great, that's a page that didn't exist the page, the day before. Some people write 10 pages a day, whatever. Like there's no right way to do this. And writing is an act of diligence, and writing is an act of faith. And you just have to keep the faith and the joy.
Wow, what a great conversation. Thank you for joining us today for your amazing day ahead. This has been so powerful.
Well, thank you all for having me.
This has been so much fun. It was so great talking with you guys.
And so great to meet you. Laurie was totally right about you.
She was.
We miss you, Laurie.
Oh, miss you guys too. Someday soon, hopefully we can be together again.
Let's all the five of us, continue this conversation like in Austin, in our house with Margaret.
Okay.
Oh, all right. I'm in. Sounds good.
Ernie.
Yes, and Ernie. I might have to bring Louie also. Louie's right here. He's like, wait, you can't leave me. Not again.
No, Mochi is staying home.
Okay. I think Ernie and Louie would be fast friends.
Yeah, I think they would be.
Yep. Well, I am really looking forward to both of your upcoming books. I'm super excited about what's coming up. All right, sounds good. Great to see you guys.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.